Hello and welcome to a lesson on change management activities from Domain 7 of the CISSP Common Body of Knowledge. We have a mnemonic to go along with these for those of you who might need to memorize both the activities and what happens in each of them. So let's get right into this. Change management has 4 basic activities, and these aren't in any particular order. They're just components of change management. We'll also have a mnemonic for each of these, since they all have sub-activities that you'll need to know for the exam. So first we have initiation of the change. Next we have review and approval. Next we have implementation and evaluation. And finally, deployment, release, planning, and control, which is a mouthful, but that's exactly how it's presented in the official training. And we'll get into what happens in each of these activities, but first we'll go over the mnemonic. But before we get into the mnemonic, make sure you understand what a memorization sheet is and how to create one. We do have a separate video on that, so make sure you check that out. Otherwise, these mnemonics are going to kind of fall flat and you're not really going to catch the vision. You'll want to add each of these mnemonics to your memorization sheet. And just to give you a quick overview of what a memorization sheet is, it's basically your personal list of topics that you'll need to memorize for the exam. And the way to use it is to simply copy the information down on a sheet of blank paper over and over until it's burned into your memory. You don't copy the mnemonic itself, but you think it while you write the letters, and then the real information or the real words. We have a sample memorization sheet that you can make a copy of for your own use, and that's covered in a separate video, but just be aware that it's not fully updated, and hopefully we can get to that soon. Okay, so for the initiation activity, you can say this phrase: I can't really play duffleboard. If you're not sure what duffleboard is, just do a quick Google search and you'll see. It's not that exciting. So let's see how the letters line up. I can't really play duffleboard. Now what you're going to do is you're going to write the red letters in bigger font on your memorization sheet. Don't write the goofiness, don't write the mnemonics, just write the letters and the real words. When you copy or write things down, you're only going to write the letters and say the mnemonic in your head, and then the real words or knowledge. So we have the activity here, which is initiation, and then we have the letters CRPD, and those are the sub-activities within the parent activity. So at the initiation, we're going to identify the change requirements. We're also going to include a risk assessment. We'll prioritize the change, and then we'll document the request, or RFC, request for change. For the review and approval, you're going to have to bear with me here. Some of these mnemonics might seem silly or beyond you, or if you work in this domain, then you probably don't need this, but this type of silly nonsense, believe it or not, is exactly what got us through the exam. So here we go. We're going to say Richard Attenborough, he's rad. A little nod to the 80s word rad, but also some trivia. Richard Attenborough was the president of the Royal Academy of Dramatic or Drama Arts. So this could almost have a double entendre. If you're not familiar with Richard Attenborough, he's the guy who played John Hammond in Jurassic Park. He's the guy who created the park. And if you get a chance, read about him on Wikipedia. His life is pretty interesting. So here we have the activity review and approval, which is the RA for Richard Attenborough, and then the letters he's rad. If you say it with a British accent, it works a little bit better. He's rad. So again, evaluating, we're going to be evaluating the RFCs for completeness. For assignment, so we're going to assign to the proper change authorization and the change authorization process based on risk and organizational practices. So we assign it to proper approving body, basically, so the proper management. Then we have stakeholder reviews. We're going to assign it to a SME, or a subject matter expert. We're also going to identify the resources and allocate the resources and devote the time and identify the resources needed to review the change. Approvals and rejection. This is just the formal action of approval and rejection, just like it says. And then documentation. Again, we're going to document approval or rejection. So each one of these phases, or each one of these activities, I should say, involves documentation. For implementation and evaluation, we're going to use the phrase, in England, Steve died. For those of you who actually live in England, you might know there was a football player legend named Steve Death. For the rest of you, maybe imagine someone you know and preferably didn't like, whose name happened to be Steve, and just pretend he died in England. Or maybe he did. Either way, that's our phrase. So hopefully you get the idea about the letters. We'll just kind of cruise through this now. Implementation and evaluation phase typically has S, scheduling the change, T for testing the change, V for verifying rollback procedures, the I is for implementing the change, the E would be for evaluating the change for proper and effective operation, And then, of course, we have documentation again in this activity. Deployment, release, and planning control doesn't really have much except that it defines deployment and release a bit differently. So we have these two activities, deployment and release, and the planning control is basically referring to you're planning these and you're controlling these two things, deployment and release. Deployment is the movement between non-production environments, and release is moving something to production. There isn't really a mnemonic for this one, so just be aware of the difference between the two terms, according to ISC². That's it for today. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned something. Head over to CISSprep.net, where we have over 1,500 up-to-date realistic practice questions, a free study guide, and more mnemonics to help you get through the exam. Take care and have a great day.